Hello, my name is Eric. Welcome to this presentation on our nation's history. I want to thank you in advance for taking the time out to watch this presentation. I'm sure you're going to find it just as exciting as I have. Now, if you're like me, whether you're in a group of people right now, maybe this is a presentation one-on-one, you're probably aware that there's some problems in our nation. We're going to help you to identify the root of those problems. There's been many organizations, many great parties, organizations, entities who have been trying to solve our nation's problems for a long time, but they keep butting their heads up against the wall, and they don't know why. But some of them do know why, and they choose to ignore the truth. They choose to ignore what's really going on. But for you, you may not be aware of what's really going on, and we're going to explain that to you in detail today. Now, I want to warn you, we're going to kind of get into some information that you may not have heard before. And so I want to take you down a little bit of a path there to kind of set the table, kind of lighten the mood for what we're about to get into. Before I do that, though, I do want to make this quick disclaimer, because we are not, even though we have problems in our nation's history, we do not advocate violence as a means to our problems that we face in our nation today. When you're done with this, you're going to see a way that you can participate and be part of the answer through lawful means and peaceable assembly. We're not going to ask you to take a sword in your hand and help us to go fight this battle violently. We're going to ask you to take a pen in your hand and lawfully take back our nation. You'll understand exactly what that means later on. This is informational purposes only. This is not legal advice, and it's for your entertainment only. So let's go down this path of our nation's history. We're going to show you a quick video clip. If you've seen the movie The Matrix, there's a clip in there that we kind of want to prep you with, because there is some information that you're going to be really irritated by. And we just want to kind of use this to lighten up the mood. What I usually tell people when we watch this and we do this presentation is that when they start talking about the Matrix, substitute corporation for that. You'll see what I mean here in a minute.
At last. Welcome, Neo. As you no doubt have guessed, I am Morpheus.
It's an honor to meet you.
No. The honor is mine. Please, come, sit. I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice. Tumbling down the rabbit hole?
You could say that.
I can see it in your eyes. You have the look of a man who accepts what he sees because he is expecting to wake up. Ironically, this is not far from the truth. Do you believe in fate, Neo?
No.
Why not?
Because I don't like the idea that I'm not in control of my life.
I know exactly what you mean. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. Do you know what I'm talking about?
The Matrix.
Do you want to know what it is? The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What truth?
That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. Follow me.
Well, now your journey begins. Now it's time for you to make the same decision. I know you feel something's wrong in our nation. I know, just like Morpheus explained in that video clip, that you're curious how deep this rabbit hole goes. That's why we wanted to prep you in the very beginning, because it's going to be your choice whether to shut this video off right now and just go back to bed and pretend you never heard anything, or you can stay tuned with me and go down this rabbit hole and see how deep the corruption in our government is right now. So, let's make that decision. The red pill or the blue pill. You got to make that decision right now. Great. For those of you that choose the red pill, follow me. Let's go down this path of our nation's history. Now, to prevent us from going down the wrong road, we need to establish a few things at the very beginning to understand how our nation came to be and how things should be. Because right now, things are not the way that they were intended to or created by our founding fathers. So let's go back a little bit, and we need to establish a couple building blocks before I show you where things got mixed up and where things got off kilter. So first building block that I want to build with you is this: the difference between a democracy and a republic. Now, you may hear these words being used off and on through presentations or movies or whatever media that you're watching right now, or on TV or whatever. But this video clip right here, it's about 12 minutes long. It is going to explain the difference between a democracy and a republic. And you'll be surprised to know our founding fathers never, ever intended for us to live in a democracy. Watch this video clip and I'll be right back with you.
When Benjamin Franklin exited the Constitutional Convention, he was asked by a woman, "Sir, what have you given us?" His immediate response was, "A republic, ma'am, if you can keep it." Yet most Americans today have been persuaded that our nation's governmental system is a democracy and not a republic. The difference between these two is essential in understanding Americanism and the American system. Before we discuss political systems, however, it's helpful to address the confusion that has been spread about the political spectrum. Many have been led to believe that the political spectrum places groups such as communists on the far left, fascists or dictators on the far right, and political moderates or centrists in the middle. However, a more accurate political spectrum will show government having zero power on the far right to having 100% power on the far left. At the extreme right, there is no government. The extreme left features total government under such labels as communism, socialism, Nazism, fascism, princes, potentates, dictators, kings, any form of total government. Those who claim that Nazis and fascists are right-wing never define their terms. This amounts to spreading confusion. Toward the middle of the political spectrum can be found the type of government limited to its proper role of protecting the rights of the people. That's where the Constitution of the United States is. Those who advocate such a form of government are really constitutional moderates. So let's analyze the basic forms of government. They are monarchy or dictatorship ruled by one, oligarchy ruled by a few, democracy ruled by a majority, republic ruled by law, and anarchy, which is ruled by no one. In discussing these five, we'll see that they can be narrowed down to even fewer. Looking first at monarchy or dictatorship, this form of government doesn't really exist in the practical sense. It's always a group that puts one of its members up front. A king has his council of nobles or earls, and every dictator has his bureaucrats or commissars, the men behind the scenes. This isn't ruled by one, even though one person may be the visible leader. It's ruled by a group. So let's eliminate monarchy, dictatorship, because it never truly exists. Oligarchy, which is ruled by a group, is the most common form of government in all history. And it is the most common form of government today. Most of the nations of the world are ruled by a powerful few, and therefore oligarchy remains. At the other end, we find anarchy, which means without government. Some people have looked over history and found that many of its worst crimes were committed by governments, so they decided that having no government might be a good idea. But this is a mistake, because as the ancient Greeks stated, without law there can be no freedom. Our founding fathers agreed and held that some amount of government is a necessary force in any civilized, orderly society. In a state of anarchy, however, everyone has to guard life, liberty, and property, and the lives of family members. Everyone must be armed, and movement is severely restricted because one's property has to be protected at all times. Civilized people have always hired someone to do the guarding, a sheriff, a police force, or some branch of government. Once law enforcement was in place, the people were freer. They could leave their property, work in the fields, and so on. In short, the proper amount of government makes everyone freer. There are some who advocate anarchy, however, not because they want no government, but because they don't like what they have. They use anarchy as a tool for revolutionary change. The condition of anarchy is very much like a vacuum where something rushes in to fill it. These calculating anarchists work to break down the existing government with rioting, killing, looting, and terrorism. Tragically, the people living in such chaos often go to those best able to put an end to it and beg them to take over and restore order. And who is best able to put an end to the chaos? The very people who started it. The anarchists who created the problem then create a government run by them, an oligarchy, where they have total power. This is exactly what happened in Russia that led to Lenin taking total power, and in Germany where Hitler's brown shirts created the chaos that brought him to power. But anarchy isn't a stable form of government. It's a quick transition from something that exists to something desired by the power-hungry. It's a temporary condition, and because it isn't permanent, we eliminate it as well. The word democracy comes from two Greek words, demos, meaning people, and kratein, meaning to rule. Democracy, therefore, means the rule of the people, majority rule. This, of course, sounds good, but suppose the majority decides to take away one's home, or business, or children. Obviously, there has to be a limit. The flaw in democracy is that the majority isn't restrained. If more than half the people can be persuaded to want something in a democracy, they rule. What about republic? Well, that comes from the Latin, res meaning thing, and publica meaning public. It means the public thing, the law. A true republic is one where the government is limited by law, leaving the people alone. America's founders had a clean slate to write on. They could have set up an oligarchy. In fact, there were some who wanted George Washington to be their king. But the founding fathers knew history, and they chose to give us the rule of law in a republic, not the rule of a majority in a democracy. Why? Let's demonstrate the difference in the setting of the Old West. Consider a lynch mob in a democracy. 35 horseback riders chase one lone gunman. They catch him, and they vote 35-1 to hang him. Democracy has triumphed, and there's one less gunman to contend with. Now consider the same scenario in a republic. The 35 horseback riders catch the gunman and vote 35-1 to hang him, but the sheriff arrives, and he says, "You can't kill him. He's got his right to a fair trial." So they take the gunman back to town, A jury of his peers is selected, and they hear the evidence and the defense, and they decide if he shall hang. Does the jury even decide by majority rule? No, it has to be unanimous or he goes free. The rights of the government aren't subject to majority rule but to the law. This is the essence of a republic. Many Americans would be surprised to learn that the word democracy does not appear in the Declaration of Independence or the U.S. Constitution, nor does it appear in any of the constitutions of the 50 states. The founders did everything they could to keep us from having a democracy. James Madison, rightly known as the father of the Constitution, wrote in essay number 10 of the Federalist Papers, "Democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, have ever been found incompatible with personal security or the rights of property, and have in general been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths." Alexander Hamilton agreed, and he stated, "We are a republican government. Real liberty is never found in despotism or in the extremes of democracy." Samuel Adams, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, stated, "Democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself." The founders had good reason to look upon democracy with contempt, because they knew that the democracies in the early Greek city-states produced some of the wildest excesses of government imaginable. In every case, they ended up with mob rule, then anarchy, and finally tyranny under an oligarchy. During that period in Greece, there was a man named Solon, who urged creation of a fixed body of law not subject to majority whims. But where the Greeks never adopted Solon's wise counsel, the Romans did. Based on what they knew of Solon's laws, they created the 12 tables of the Roman law, and in effect built a republic that limited government power and left the people alone. Since government was limited, the people were free to produce, with the understanding that they could keep the fruits of their labor. In time, Rome became wealthy and the envy of the world. In the midst of plenty, however, the Roman people forgot what freedom entailed. They forgot that the essence of freedom is the proper limitation of government. When government power grows, people freedom recedes. Once the Romans dropped their guard, power-seeking politicians began to exceed the powers granted them in the Roman Constitution. Some learned that they could elect politicians who would use government power to take property from some and give it to others. Agriculture subsidies were introduced, followed by housing and welfare programs. Inevitably, taxes rose and controls over the private sector were imposed. Soon, a number of Rome's producers could no longer make ends meet, and they went on the dole. Productivity declined, shortages developed, and mobs began roaming the streets, demanding bread and circuses from the government. Many were induced to trade freedom for security. Eventually, the whole system came crashing down. They went from a republic to a democracy, and ended up with an oligarchy under a progression of the Caesars. Thus, democracy itself is not a stable form of government. Instead, it is the gradual transition from limited government to the unlimited rule of an oligarchy. Knowing this, we as Americans are ultimately left with only two choices. We can keep our republic, as Franklin put it, or we will inevitably end up with an oligarchy, a tyranny of the elite.
Wow, what a great presentation. Now you know the difference between a democracy and a republic. And it's going to be critical that we understand that and we help our nation get back to that form of government really quick. Now there's another building block that I need to help to establish here before we move on. And I'm going to make a statement here and I'm going to support that statement and show you what I'm talking about. Number one, the created can never be greater than the Creator. Now, when you understand who the Creator is, number one, our founding fathers knew that our nation had to be founded in some sort of law. They chose God's law to be the foundation of our nation. There's nothing we can do about it. I know you may not, maybe you don't believe in God, maybe you're not a Christian, that's okay. It doesn't change the facts and it doesn't change the situation that our nation was founded on God's law. We can't change that. This is America. That's the way it is. We just have to learn how to work together with that foundation. But I'll tell you this, when you understand the reason why they based this on God's law was the fact that God created man to be sovereign. Now when you look at the big picture here, and this word sovereignty is going to be a really key issue going forward, and you need to understand, that's why I'm dealing with this right now in this building block. You have to understand that because God made us sovereign, there's a problem for people who are not sovereign, who don't recognize us as sovereign. You see, because for the first time in the history of the world, our founding fathers acknowledged and recognized, affirmed that God made the people individually sovereign. So when this country was formed, the power was not given to a king. The power was not given to a ruler. It was not given to a government. The power was given to the sovereign people in America. That's right. The government has no jurisdiction whatsoever over us. We are the authority. The power was given to the people, for the people, by the people, and from the people. Now let me read something to you out of the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence says that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Do you understand what that just said? Our founding fathers made the declaration that we are the government. We, the people, you and me, we the people established government. We gave them life. The nation was founded on God's law. He created us to be sovereign. Sovereign man created the government. I want you to understand the power flow, because I will be using that throughout this presentation, this power flow. God the Father, sovereign man, government, and there's one level under government, and that's corporations. The government then created corporations. And that's going to be very critical for you to understand later on in this presentation. So remember, created entities cannot have more power than their creator. In the beginning, sovereign man on the soil, everybody's living life. Our founding fathers created a national Republican government in form, flow, and style. They created a Republican form of government, just as they stated in the video here a while ago. They also, when they set up the states had sovereignty. Now, you might have been hearing some of this stuff in the news lately, especially with the issues going on in Arizona and in a couple other states that are really talking about this state sovereignty. Texas talks about it a lot. These state sovereignty issues. Now, I'm going to show you what happened with the states here in a little bit. So what did we do? We created government, and in order to protect our rights, we created a government to help us with life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. But what did we do? They created a constitution. They created a Bill of Rights. Now, the Bill of Rights is misunderstood by a lot of people. They think that the Bill of Rights gives them the rights. But I'm here to tell you that the Bill of Rights limits government, not man. You had rights of free speech. You had rights to do all these other things before the Constitution was ever created. The Constitution was written by the people. We the people wrote the Constitution to limit government, to let them know, we created you, you can't take this away from us. It didn't give us any rights. It'd be like saying God wrote the Bible, so now He knew what He could do. It's not the way it happens. God didn't write the rules so He would know now what He could do and the rights that He had. Man didn't write the Constitution so they would know what rights they had. No, it was told so the government knew they could not infringe upon our rights and take those away from us. So where did things go wrong? What happened? The Civil War happened. Now, the southern states succeeded. Congress couldn't make a quorum. And on March 28, 1861, they adjourned something called sine die. Now that means they adjourned without a day. They did not announce when it would reconvene. It literally vacated the de jure lawful constitutional government. Now I used the word here, de jure. And I'm going to explain that a little bit later in the presentation, but de jure for now means lawful. And I'll explain a little bit more here in a minute. Now what happened here is it created a state of emergency. We didn't have a government to run. Because what happened, the Republic was vacated. the Republic form of government, the original organic constitution that we lived by, was now vacated. And it's at this point I help people kind of to paint a picture. Imagine the Congress. You watch it on TV, you see all the seats in Congress and everything. Imagine everybody getting up out of those seats, walking out of the building and going across the street into another building where there's some other seats. The same seats over here in another building across the street. They got up out of the lawful seats of government, they went across the street and they sat down in an unlawful government. Now I'm going to explain here in a minute. What I'm telling you right now is that there was two seats. The lawful government is still sitting there vacant. All these years. They got up, went over here. This is sitting vacant. With its original organic constitution, while they went over here and sat down in some other seats. What were these other seats? They were the unlawful seats. The de facto means unlawful. The de facto government. We have a de jure government now, and we have a de facto government. Unlawful government. We have a state in our country called martial law. Martial law is now effective and has been in effect since Abraham Lincoln. What does that mean? That just means that the president now has the ability to write executive orders. We are in a state of emergency. What happened here is the government, they created a second government. All right, this is point. Next point. A second government is formed, the unlawful government. If you look at on February 21st, 1871, Congress passes an act called the Act to Provide a Government for the District of Columbia. It's also known as the Act of 1871. So they got together, they create a second government in corporate form, only to have jurisdiction over this area, a 10 by 10 box called Washington, D.C. With no constitutional authority, Congress created a separate form of government for the District of Columbia. Now there's two constitutions. Two constitutions exist right now at this point in time. An organic original constitution and the unlawful corporate constitution. Now you say, well, you're crazy. What are you talking about, Eric? Let me prove it to you. If you go into your history books, they're going to show you there, I don't know, there's 20 some amendments right now. I want to go back to the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment that you're going to see in your history books right now is going to read this. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Section 2 of that says Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. Okay, big deal. Well, now let me read you the original organic 13th Amendment. Then you'll see what the big deal is. If any citizen of the United States shall accept, claim, receive, or retain any title of nobility or honor, or shall without the consent of Congress accept and retain any present pension, office, or any kind whatsoever from any emperor, king, prince, or foreign power, such person shall cease to be a citizen of the United States, and shall be incapable of holding any office of trust or profit under thereof, or either of them. Now here's the big deal. The Constitution states in this amendment basically that you cannot hold a title of nobility or honor. There's only one group of people right now that holds titles of nobility and honor, and those are attorneys. They hold titles of esquire. Esquires are one rank below knight in the British system. These people, according to our founding fathers, could not hold office. Did you hear me? How many attorneys are in office right now passing the laws to enslave you and I? These people, according to the original organic constitution, would be incapable not only of holding office, but they would cease to be a citizen of the United States. In a court case called Downs versus Bidwell, this is back in 1901, the idea prevails with some. Indeed, it has expressed in arguments at the bar that we have in this country substantially two national governments. One to be maintained under the Constitution with all its restrictions, and the other to be maintained by Congress outside and independent of that instrument, by exercising such powers as other nations on the earth are accustomed to. He goes on to say later on that it will be an evil day for American liberty if the theory of a government outside the supreme law of the land finds lodgment into our constitutional jurisprudence. Folks, this is exactly what happened, and I'm going to show you how it happened. The Act of 1871 initiated the need to create a municipal corporation to govern the District of Columbia. This act placed Congress, listen to me, this act placed Congress as the board of directors for that corporation. The purpose of Congress was to act as the governing body over this municipality called Washington, D.C. Their primary objective was to direct business under martial law and permit to engage in corporate activities prohibited by the Constitution. Congress could only pass a law it desired to as long as it only applied within this 10-mile square box. They could do whatever they wanted to do as long as it was only inside this 10 by 10 box. So initially, no big deal. This is probably a good idea. But I propose to you that they had a plan. That this was just the next step in a series of many steps that they were about to take to continue to cause problems in our nation. This act also called for adopting a corporate constitution for U.S. Corp. Now, this corporation that was created, guess what the name was? United States of America. U.S. Corp. All capital letters. U.S. Corp. This constitution that they created, this corporate charter, was the exact same. It was identical to the original Constitution, except for the 13th Amendment. They scratched that out conveniently so their attorneys could now hold office in this corporation. They took all of it, rewrote the 13th Amendment. Now we have the two constitutions. The organic, lawful Constitution has been vacated, and now they continue to do business posing as a lawful government. They're doing business under this corporate charter. They trademarked, there's many other names, U.S. government, United States, USA. These are all capital letter names. They are now being used as a corporate name. Okay, so you say, big deal. Our country, our government is being run as a corporation. Big deal. Well, I'm going to show you. Remember you took the red pill? You wanted to see how deep this rabbit hole goes? Let me show you a few things, what happened now that they have this corporation established. There's something called the Buck Act of 1940. This Buck Act allowed any department of the federal government to create federal areas, okay, for the imposition of the Public Salary Tax Act. All right, so the point is, they now have the ability to create federal areas. So what did they do? They put a blanket over the entire United States and created 12 Federal Reserve districts. Each Federal Reserve district has its own Federal Reserve Bank. Wonder what's going to happen now. The Federal Reserve, by the way, in case you haven't realized, is not federal and there's no reserve. The Federal Reserve is a privately held company. It's called Federal Reserve to deceive us to thinking that it's a government entity. But that's no more of a government entity than the IRS. The IRS is a privately held corporation headquartered in Puerto Rico. That's not even a government entity. Sure you want to see how deep the rabbit hole goes? Well, let me explain this. Right after the Buck Act and they established these 12 Federal Reserve districts, there's something called the Bretton Woods Agreement. The Bretton Woods Agreement now is in 1944. Buck Act was in 1940. I'm kind of trying to lay a timeline for you so you can see what's been going on historically. The U.S. corporation arranged for the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, again, not a government entity, another private corporation. The U.S. corporation, the 10 by 10 box that they set up for this 10 by 10 box was now quit claim deeded to the International Monetary Fund, and the use of the U.S. Treasury as the drawing account. The IMF now had the ability to use the U.S. Treasury as the drawing account. Okay, so what does that mean? Now let me, just to make sure that you understand, that this corporation called the United States, posing as our lawful government, but it's not lawful, it's unlawful, they are now owned by the International Monetary Fund since 1944. Our government is owned by private bankers since 1944. It was quit claim deeded in the Bretton Woods Agreement. Do you understand what I'm trying to tell you here? We are owned by a foreign entity. Posing as our government, a foreign entity now controls our nation. So why? Now what? Because whoever controls the money in our nation controls our nation. So here's what they did. They knew that the states now, remember I talked about state sovereignty and personal sovereignty? This is where state sovereignty comes in. The states, it was illegal to use foreign currency in the states. The Constitution, the state organic constitutions forbid the use of foreign currency in the states. So here's what they did. In order to use their Federal Reserve notes now, the states had to become sub-corporations of the parent company that was headquartered in Washington, D.C., in the District of Columbia. So now they've made all of the states incorporate. So now you'll see our states now doing business as all capital letters, state of Alabama, state of Nebraska, whatever, state of New York, whatever it is, those all capital letter names are now sub-corporations of United States Corporation. All for the purpose of allowing the Federal Reserve to make it legal now, or forced upon the states to use the Federal Reserve notes. So now the state of all capital letter sub-corporation now exists within the free state of X, the free state of Oklahoma. They exist right inside there, incorporated. So what does this mean to you? Okay, still, big deal. What does this mean to you now? Where are we going with this? Next point. The only thing that they had left to do is to incorporate you. They incorporated the state, they incorporated our government in the 10 by 10 box called Washington, D.C. They incorporated all the states. And I'll get into a little bit later, they incorporated every county. Every city is incorporated. The only thing they could not control is you, because you're sovereign. So they needed to create a corporation for you. And that's exactly what they did. Remember their corporate constitution? They ended with the 13th Amendment. They rewrote the 13th Amendment. Now they added the 14th Amendment. That's how they incorporated you. Now almost everyone in our nation has reduced themselves to the status of a 14th Amendment citizen, aka all capital letter U.S. citizen, with only the rights and privileges granted to them by the corporation. You're now incorporated. Congratulations. Remember the power flow? We had sovereign God, we had sovereign man, man created government, government created corporations. So now how do they control you? What is this all about? What are you talking about, Eric? Yeah, remember this is the thing about the red pill, how deep does the rabbit hole go? Look, just hear me out. Watch this. This is the point where I show people. I tell them to go grab your birth certificate, grab your checkbook, and check out a few things. I'm going to show you something here on the birth certificate. This birth certificate, and I love using this demonstration. This is a state of Iowa birth certificate. Okay, right here there's a little part that says state of birth. If not in the USA, all capital letters, name your country. Country. That's right. So that's where they put in the state right here. And down here, this is pretty interesting. Right here at the bottom it says Midwest Bank Note Company. So this is where I give another visual of what's going on here. They created this 14th Amendment person, this citizen right here. You were born with this over your head. Everywhere you go as a real person, this thing goes. This was created to be a front. This is created to be this legal fiction to control your life. Everything about you stems from this. You then get Social Security cards. You then go and you get a bank transaction. If you have your checkbook in front of you, look at the signature line on the bottom of your checkbook. That's not a line, folks. See the little MP next to it says microprint? Why don't you pull out a magnifying glass and look and see what that says? Most of them say something along the lines of authorized representative. That's right. You, the real man, are the authorized representative of this legal fiction called you. Whatever your name is, John Doe, Jane Doe, all capital letter name, like up in the top left-hand corner of your checkbook. I know some of them might not be all capital letters. They started changing it because we started catching on. But most of them, you go down in the bank records, everything's in all capital letter names. You, the authorized representative, are that signing authority, the real person that gives life to that corporate entity. But they control it because it's another sub-corporation controlled from Washington, D.C. all the way into all the states into our lives. Point is, this entity is not you. It's a fiction to trust. All I know is that this thing has controlled us and hangs over our head ever since we were born. These are called adhesion contracts. See, in our sovereign capacity, God created us to have free will. So we could go around, but we also have the freedom to enter into contracts. Even though we did not have full disclosure of these contracts, everything that we do in our life right now that surrounds us binds us to these contracts with this government entity. Every time you sign a standardized form or application in your state, county, city, most likely it's an adhesion contract. It's written for their benefit, making you a 14th Amendment person, subject to their statutes and codes. Adhesion contracts are your birth certificate, driver's license, the fact that you live in a federal zip code, marriage license. Just the fact that you use Federal Reserve notes enters you into a contract with them. Your voter registration application, right there. Are you a U.S. citizen? Remember, U.S. citizen is, are you a member of this corporation in the 10 by 10 box? Do you allow us to have authority over you? You're entering into that contract with them. How big is this problem? So how big is this problem? What do we do? Where do we go from now? This de facto government is not subject to the consent of the governed. They have gotten way out of control. Rather, the governed are now subject to every whim and greed of this corporation. You ever realize why a 90% disapproval of Obamacare can get passed? You ever wonder why all the disapproval with the bailouts and all the stuff that's going on right now? Disapproval everywhere. But they're still going ahead and doing things because it's for their benefit, their corporation. And we have no say-so. They just go ahead and do it anyway. Remember, the Congress now do not work for you. Even though you voted them in, Congress works for them. Congress, remember, is the board of directors for that corporation. Everything that they do is for the benefit of the corporation, not for us. They put on a good show, I'll tell you. They really do. How close it is. 51%, 49%, so close. Gives us that hope that maybe next time we can reverse that decision or reverse that act or whatever that they did. They play a really good game with us. The United States corporate government is the instrument of the international bankers. They control our nation through the banks. This means that all U.S. citizens are owned by foreign corporations from birth until death. Now here's the crazy thing. Even the U.S. courtrooms have been incorporated. All U.S. courts. Now, I'm going to tell you, if you haven't heard of Manta.com, MANTA.com, or Dun & Bradstreet, you can go to either one of these. They're both credit rating agencies. Well, at least Dun & Bradstreet is. Manta lists all the corporate entities out there. You will find every state. Type in your state name, state of whatever. Type in your county, whatever the county name is, and then type in your county court. Type in the federal courts. You will see that these have all been created as corporations. For what? For profit. Why is it that every time you get pulled over, you got to pay a fine? Every time. This is kind of a crazy thing. I show people this in my presentations. Can you get a fair trial? This is the state of Nebraska's oath of office for a judge. I'm not going to read the judge's name. I'll get in trouble for that. But let me read this. I, Judge, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Nebraska, and willfully discharge the duties of the judge of the county and district according to the best of my ability, and that at the election at which I was chosen to fill said office, I have not improperly influenced in any way the vote of my elector, and have not accepted, nor will accept or receive, directly or indirectly, any money or other valuable thing from any corporation, company, or person, or any promise of office for the official act or influence, for any vote may give or withhold any bill, resolution, or appropriation. It's interesting that they have said that they have not improperly influenced or accepted or received directly or indirectly any money. Let me read the court costs. Every time this judge swings the gavel, you're guilty, he gets $6 donated to his retirement fund. Did you know that? Did you know that $2 gets deposited to manage that fund for that judge? And the law enforcement gets $2 donated to their improvement fund. Seems like a conflict of interest to me, don't you think? I'm sure it's the same in your state, wherever you're at. These judges, they pull you over, or the police officers pull you over. It's a money, point is, it's a money revenue. They're a corporation. They have to receive money, an income-generating business. This is what they've turned it into be. These are not courts of justice anymore. These are not Article III courts. These are not constitutional courts. Common law courts. That's not what we're in. The whole law of proven guilty until proven innocent is what it is. It's not innocent until proven guilty. It's the other way around. So we go to court and we don't know what the heck's going on. We don't realize that they already deem us guilty. It's flip-flopped in the way it should be. We need to return back to the Constitution. We've been like this frog in boiling water, like I said earlier. They've been turning up the heat little by little to control us. They are about ready to wipe out our state sovereignty. Now, there's another quick video that I want you to watch. It's another clip from The Matrix. Now that we've explained a bunch of stuff, and I guess I also need to kind of conclude this part of the presentation with helping you to understand that you're going to need to investigate this, obviously. Don't take my word for it. I know you won't. But go and research this stuff for yourself. It took me quite a while to really grasp and understand what's been going on in our country. I didn't believe it the first time I had heard it. I had to see it for myself. I had to experience it for myself. I've experienced this in the courtrooms. I've experienced the corruption in the courts and in the governments. You will too. Do some research on this. Once you do, be careful who you talk to, because until they hear a whole presentation like this, if you start talking to them bits and pieces about this, they're not going to believe you. Watch this next video clip and you'll understand what I'm talking about. I'll be right back.
The Matrix is a system, Neo. That system is our enemy. When you're inside, you look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged. And many of them are so inert, so hopelessly dependent on the system, that they will fight to protect it. Were you listening to me, Neo? Or were you looking at the woman in the red dress?
I was...
Look again.
Well, just take that as a word of caution, that people really are bound by this system. There's a lot of people receiving government benefits today. The last thing they're going to do is try to cut that off from themselves. And that's understandable. Just don't get discouraged. Have them watch this presentation and they'll understand what you understand now. So where do we go from here? What do we do? Well, each one of us has a political will. We are the only one that can choose to stand up for who we are. We're the only ones that can stand up and fight for our own individual sovereignty and the sovereignty of this nation. Should we try to fix this corporation? There's a lot of people who think that we need to go in there and we need to fix the corporation. I say good luck. I don't think you can do it. I think it's beyond repair. These corporate fictions, they're not like government. They're privately foreign corporations. I don't know how you plan on fixing them. But good luck. We don't have jurisdiction over them anyway. Should we try to abolish the de facto government? Well, I don't think we need to do that, because they're doing a pretty good job right now of self-destructing. They're destroying themselves right now, evidenced by all the debt ceiling talk and things that are going on. They're pretty much bankrupt and they know it. I propose We just allow the corporation to self-destruct. They've got so many issues to deal with right now with their current debt crisis and everything that they're dealing with. Let's just let nature take its course. In the meantime, I want to present to you the solution. The solution to our nation's problems. The solution that some people fail to understand. What is this solution? It's called the Republic for the United States of America. In the Declaration of Independence, we the people have a default button the Founding Fathers left for us. The Declaration states that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter it and abolish it and to institute new government. It's our right because we're the authority, we're the sovereign people. The government is our servant, not the other way around. So we have the ability to fix it. So what happened? It's now important for you to understand the definition between de jure and de facto. Black's Law Dictionary states that de facto is a government actually exercising power and control in the state as opposed to the true and lawful government. A government not established according to the Constitution of the state. A government not lawfully entitled to recognition or supremacy, but which has nevertheless supplanted or displaced the government de jure. Now this is in their dictionaries. The dictionary that the attorneys put together and wrote. Remember the attorneys that aren't supposed to hold office? These are the same attorneys that wrote these definitions and admit that they're operating in a de facto capacity. They're showing it right to us in front of our face. That they do not have the lawful authority to be doing what they're doing. The only reason they can do what they're doing is because there is no de jure government. This de facto government, according to Black's Law Dictionary, is a government deemed unlawful, wrong, and unjust. Now, what does de jure mean? What does government de jure mean? It means a government of right. It's the true and lawful government. A government that is established according to the Constitution of the state. A government deemed lawful, deemed rightful, and deemed just. So what's the problem here? The problem is there's no de jure government. They vacated that, remember? Remember I told you about these seats that they got up out of and went across the street and sat down in those other seats, the de facto seats, the unlawful seats? The de jure seats are just sitting there with the organic Constitution up to the original 13th Amendment. They're just sitting there. Well, here's what happened, folks. Simultaneously, people, men and women, sovereign men and women from all 50 free states restored and re-inhabited the legitimate constitutional government. We did this by lawful means and peaceable assembly. People in all 50 states have come together unanimously in republic to re-inhabit the national structure of government for the protection and the preservation of our God-given unalienable rights. In March of 2010, the sovereign people in all 50 states re-inhabited the lawful de jure government as it existed prior to 1861. In September of 2010, sovereign members from 42 free states convened a lawful Congress. For the first time since 1861, the de jure lawful government held Congress, thus reestablishing the lawful de jure government. All three branches of government have been established. The legislative branch, complete with committees. The executive branch, complete with a cabinet. And the judicial branch, complete with Supreme Courts in place. We are back, folks. The Republic is back. We also sat and reestablished the de jure grand juries. Now this is something the person that invited you or gave you this information, the person that is moderating this presentation, you're going to have to get with them and they're going to explain a little bit more about these de jure grand juries. All 50 states that make up the Republic for the United States have reseated the lawful government. In each state, we have governors, we have secretaries of state, we have state courts, we have state legislatures, we have representatives. We're all set. The de jure government is back. The people have set up constructs called the Declaration of Sovereign Rights, similar to the Declaration of Independence. This document is going to help you to eliminate those adhesion contracts that we talked about earlier. Remember that birth certificate that's been controlling you, saying that you're not sovereign? You get to throw that away and be sovereign and declare yourself to be sovereign again. So there's no more corporate control over you anymore. No more corporation posing as our government. Each of the free states are assisting to create county assemblies. There's assemblies you can go to and you can hear what's going on. We have county settlement constitutions being established. Each county assembly has a de jure grand jury. And this is the venue for the people to start to govern themselves again. These are all things that your moderator or the person that invited you can help you understand. In summary, I'm just here to let you know that we the people and all 50 republics have re-inhabited the de jure lawful government that was vacated back in 1861. And we've begun the process that will return our country to the original organic constitution and common law. We've begun to establish the de jure grand juries that will act as the guardians of the republic in order to protect both our freedoms and the pursuit of our God-given unalienable rights. Where do you come in? We need your help. We need you to take that pen in your hand. You know the situation in each one of your states. That's why you have to get back together with the moderator. Get back together with the person that invited you. Find out what do you need to do to get rid of those contracts that you have with this corporate government. What do you need to do to declare yourself sovereign? And what do you need to do to help further the efforts of the republic being reestablished? They have a big problem right now, folks. Two governments exist in our country right now. The de jure government and the de facto government. The world has taken note. The world knows that two governments exist. Stay tuned and see what happens. God bless you, and God bless the Republic for the United States.